Good morning everyone, and welcome to the webinar on how to present and speak without using notes. That is, you're the speaker who stands up and delivers a keynote or a seminar or a breakout session, and you deliver your content without reading from your script or constantly flicking through pages or going through your notes or juggling palm cards. You're the speaker who presents with your eyes and your attention focused on the audience, responding and engaging to them as required. For those of you who haven't been to webinars before, please ask questions as we go. Take notes, participate, think of a presentation that's coming up. Can you do your next presentation without notes? Could have you done a previous presentation without notes using some of the strategies I'm going to teach you? So Peter Dew's my name. I'm a public speaking trainer and coach, and I come from a position of being afraid and having fear around public speaking. Most of you know that I also stutter, but I now don't let that stutter stop me from having the courage to speak up. Short agenda, the role of your notes. So while you're going to be presenting without notes, I'm not saying eliminate notes or don't have notes. 5 models that you can use to help you present without notes. My suggestion is you work out which one or two of these models works best, and being aware of all 5 models, it might be that at another seminar or another presentation you decide to use a different model. And what do you do if you do forget? So you've taken the leap of faith, you're now running your presentation without notes. What do you do if you forget? Let's get started. And as I said, please ask questions as we go. The role of notes. I think it's important that you still have some notes up there just in case. I use notes as a fallback. One of the things I do with people when coaching them to do a presentation, say a wedding speech or a conference speech, is to have a full script, so 3 or 4 pages, and then condense that to a 1-pager of bullet points or a 1-pager mind map. When you go up, you have your full script and you have your 1-pager, but you know your stuff so well that they're only there as a backup. So this webinar is not about not having notes. It's about having your notes and using them as a backup. You can have palm cards as well, and if you don't like a 1-pager with bullet points, you can have a 1-pager written mind map. And I'm going to talk about mind mapping as we go through the webinar. So I would, if I'm doing a keynote and I'm being paid, and I would have a full script. If you do bring up a full script, make sure it's 14-point font and you have 1.5 spacing between each line. One of the mistakes people do when they do use notes is the font is too small and the lines, there's no spacing, so if they lose where they are, they can't find their place easily. And then have either a 1-page bullet point, have some palm cards, or have a written mind map as a backup. So notes have a role to play, but the great speakers very rarely need them. So these are some of the models you can use. Tell stories, have some visual cues, some visual aids, some things that prompt you. Answer the most common questions that come up in your topic, the 3 most common questions. Use mind mapping, use a mnemonic or an acronym to guide you through your speech. I'm going to go through these 5 models one by one. Stories. Use your personal stories. When you're telling a presentation, you could have 2 or 3 stories, and each story could take about 10 minutes, and there's a 30-minute presentation. 3 stories times 10 minutes. Take off a little bit of time for an introduction, a little bit of time for a conclusion, and there's a 30-minute presentation. Why are stories so powerful? The first thing is stories are your intellectual property. They're your unique experience. The case you've worked on, the project that was difficult, the project was going over budget, and over time, the way you were able to bring that back on track, the family that had a child with an intellectual disability that was struggling to survive, and you connected them with some additional resources, with some support. You found them some respite. That's your unique intellectual property. You don't forget your stories. When you tell a story that you've lived, that you've experienced, you don't need your notes. So recounting a successful outcome, even recounting an unsuccessful outcome where the outcome did not turn out positive. It's not that the story's a failure, it's the lessons and what went wrong and what should have happened. So the reason we use stories is that we don't need to remember them. And I talk about building a bank of stories. Collect stories. Just a recent story. My daughter has just delivered her first child, my first grandchild. And the midwife calls once a day, so my daughter's gone home straight after birth almost. So the nurse goes on daily visits, checks the weight, checks everything's okay. The other day, the little baby peed, excuse me disclosing this, peed all over the nurse. Now, how do you frame something? Is that a disaster or is that bad? Well, the nurse said, wow, this is fantastic. This means the baby's getting lots of fluids, the kidneys are working. This is a great outcome. So I've just told you a little story about how you frame something. Most times when people get peed on, it's a negative thing, but this nurse has been able to reframe it into something positive. So when you use stories, see, I don't have to write that story down. I don't have to read that story. When you use stories, it has to illustrate a point. And then you need to highlight the benefit of your point to the audience. So a 30-minute keynote could be a 45-minute keynote, could be 3 or 4 stories that have powerful points that give wonderful outcomes, wonderful lessons to the audience. So the audience walks out knowing that they can now move forward. They can look at problems. They can reframe problems differently from a negative to a positive. Use your stories. Stories are a fantastic way to present without notes. Visual props. To do a presentation without the use of notes, the second model you can use is to bring up 3 or 4 objects, visual cues or physical cues that now anchor your 3 points. So for example, if I was doing a presentation around feedback, a 45-minute keynote speech on feedback as the food of champions, and I talk about the importance of getting feedback, and there's 3 points, 3 ways of getting powerful feedback, and I'll bring up 3 obstacles with me that will remind me my 3 points. Feedback is the food of champions, and it's really valuable. It's how we learn. So the first obstacle I'd bring up would be a postcard with someone with a picture like this. Someone in the audience can give you feedback. So early on when you arrive at your keynote, who's the first people who arrive? Introduce yourself and ask 1 or 2 of them to give you feedback at the end of your keynote. If they could take a few notes and provide you with keynotes. Have a friend or a colleague in the audience give you feedback. So I didn't have those words written up there. I used the visual to remind me that you can use an audience member or a colleague or a friend in the room, or you can even pay a coach in the room to give you feedback. Second feedback, especially for non-verbal communication, and a great way of practicing is to practice in the mirror. And if your body language or your facial expressions are not congruent with the words you're saying, then you'll see that in the mirror. So the mirror is a great way of you can receive feedback. And there's the words around that prompt. So having a little mirror up front with me, it can be a small one that fits in my wallet, just having that object laid out on the lectern or on the table reminds me of my second point. And my third point is the video camera. get someone in the room to video record you. Hand them your smartphone, your iPhone or your Android, and say, could you record my 5-minute introduction? The video does not lie. The beauty of the video is you can listen to yourself, you can see yourself, you can email the audio file or the visual file to a friend or a colleague or a coach who can give you a second opinion. The video camera does not lie. It allows visual feedback. You can email it to a friend. See how just that picture, and I wouldn't bring up a picture, so I'd lay out the postcard of the group of people in the audience. I'd lay out the little mirror and I'd put my mobile phone on silent down on the desk. There's my 3 points. There's my 3 points. I've got no notes. I now talk about the power of feedback whenever you're presenting and how can you get feedback. 3 main ways of getting feedback. A 4th way would be to do a post-workshop survey, and I might have a form out there, a survey form or a questionnaire, and that could be my 4th point. After you've completed your presentation, hand out a feedback form and get everyone to fill it in, and that way you'll learn about how you went. PowerPoint slides are a visual cue. I'm doing this webinar today without any notes. You can consider each of these slides as a cue. I'm not reading from a script. I don't have any notes. I don't have any preparation other than knowing that the best way to present is to present without notes, and here's 5 strategies. But don't use PowerPoint as your script. Do not read word from your PowerPoint slides. It's not about lots of words. It's about an image, like a mirror or a model, that then gives you the visual cue to talk about what you're going to talk about. Are there any questions at the moment? I just pause while I have a quick drink. Any questions? Moving on. Next model. Use the most common questions. Let's say you're speaking on how to retire financially secure. How to retire with sufficient money to live the retirement lifestyle you want. What are the 3 or 4 most frequent questions that people ask you when they come to see you? And answer those questions. Answer those questions. What am I going to do with my child when they leave school? What are post-school options for my child with an intellectual disability? Question. So the most common question is, what am I going to do with them? Will someone else look after them? Do they have an option for work? Answer those questions. You know the answers. You get asked them all the time. It's part of your work. So just write down the 3 or 4 most frequent questions on the topic of which you're speaking. You know them really well. You know the answers. That's your framework for a half-hour, 45-minute keynote without the need for notes. Use mind mapping. So mind mapping, generally core message, once again, 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, maybe some sub-points if you need to. The points could be stories. You could put 1 word in there, 1 word of the story. Welcome back, Belinda. Just checking that you can hear me. Welcome back, Belinda. Can you hear me and see my screen? I do apologise, but that's the first time I've ever had a webinar drop out on me, so I lost everybody. Can you hear me? Can you see my screen, Belinda? Just type in the dialog box. So I'm talking about mind mapping. core message, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 points. Have your sub-points for each point. Those sub-points could be a story, and then that's all you need. You can use some other models for mind mapping. You can use a map of Australia, for example. And what I do is I use the cities, 5 cities. If you want more than 5 points, you can bring in Hobart. So apologies to Hobart, apologies to the ACT, and apologies to Darwin. But let's say I want to talk to you about the 5 keys of an effective speech. So you're thinking about doing a presentation, you're invited. What are the 5 keys? What are the 5 things that are going to make the biggest difference to you? And I'm going to start with Perth, and I can remember the cities. I don't need to mention this. So the first thing you need to do is do lots of preparation. P for Perth stands for preparation. You need to do lots of preparation. What do I mean by preparation? I can talk about preparation for 20 minutes. The next thing is you need to bring the right attitude. A for Adelaide, A for attitude. What do I mean by attitude? The passion, the enthusiasm. You need to be congruent with your message. Which moves us to Melbourne. Clarity of message, M for message. Are you clear of what your message is? If some people walk away with only one thing, what is your message? My one message today is all the great speakers in the world are able to present without notes. You too can learn using one of these 5 models to present without notes. Have a structure. Make sure you've got a clear beginning, middle and end, and you can have some transitions. I can speak for an hour on structure just alone. And finally, another thing that people neglect is their body language. B for Brisbane, B for body language. So there's no notes there. I'm using that mind map, which is the map of Australia, to anchor my points. How'd I go? Preparation, attitude, message, structure, and body language. So there's a 1 hour or a 45-minute keynote speech entitled The 5 Keys to an Effective Presentation, or the Keys to an Effective Speech, the 5 keys, and there it is, just my mind map. Give you another example. What are the biggest problems facing new public speakers? So people are starting out, you're doing your first keynote, your first presentation. What are the 4 biggest problems that I see all the time? Well, the first problem, and I'm using a compass, and I'm going to go north, east, west, south, which spells news, N-E-W-S, news. So the first thing is people get struck by nerves. They're on this big stage for the first time, and all of a sudden they get that stage fright, the nerves kick in. I can talk for that for about 10 minutes. Finally, or the second one is ego. They worry about what people are thinking about them. What if I don't do a good enough job? That's your ego stepping in. The W, news, north, east, west, south. The biggest problem people start is they don't know how to start strong. So they have a weak opening, and then they end flat. They have a weak closing. So don't do weak openings and weak closings. And finally, people suffer from self-doubt. They worry that they're not good enough, that they're not worthy. And there's the reveal. So I've got a 45-minute keynote speech based on my mind map, which is the compass, 4 points of the compass. Five capital cities of mainland Australia, of the 5 states. That's mind mapping. Next model, use acronyms or mnemonics. I can talk for 45 minutes on how to get ready for every presentation. And I use the acronym PRIME. The P stands for preparation. The R stands for relaxation. And we learnt that nerves and anxiety are a big problem, so learn to relax. The I stands for immerse yourself. You need to do more public speaking. The M stands for monitor and measuring. Feedback, you need feedback. And the E stands for you've got to take some risks. You've got to expand your comfort zone. And there it is. There's the acronym. I have other acronyms that I use. Communicate with care. Conviction is the C. Attitude is the A. Responsibility is the R. And energy, the right energy level, is the E. Communicate with care. Use an acronym. What do you do if you forget? So Peter, you've told me to go and present without notes. But what if I present? But what if I forget halfway through? Here's some tips to help you if you forget. First of all, pause and breathe and stay calm. In other words, don't panic. And even though you may be panicking, act calm. So part of staying calm, and that's clam, that should be calm, part of staying calm is letting the audience know that you're calm. Don't mention that you've lost your way. Don't mention that you've forgotten what's next. Don't mention you've had a brain drain, because the audience doesn't know that you've forgotten what's coming next. And 99% of the time, you will recover, you will remember. You can pause for 5 to 10 seconds and the audience does not mind. Go back to your core purpose, your core message, and just reiterate what today's all about. And that might just give you enough time for your mind to recover. Or the other thing is distract the audience. Talk to the person next to you for a couple of minutes. What have you learned so far from me? What's the biggest issue facing you? Share that with the person next to you. And as they do that little exercise, once again, you're appearing to stay calm, a little bit like the duck going across the water, nice and smooth, and the feet traveling at 100 miles an hour. You can go to your notes, you can go to your cheat sheet, your one pager, your palm cards, recover, come back, bring the audience back. Okay, can I have everyone's attention? So what I want to talk about now, or go back to what they were talking about. What was the biggest issues that you people discussed? A few questions, then go back to where you are. So that's what you do if you forget. Stay calm, or pretend to stay calm. Don't let people know. Don't say, sorry, I've just lost my way, forgotten where I am, I've had a senior's moment, brain drain. Go to your core message. That's a way of recovering. So what I'm really here to talk to you today about is, if you are able to present without notes, you're going to come across so much more engaging, so much more passionate, so much more knowledgeable. I've forgotten what I'm going to say, but I've just let you know. Back to core message. Get the audience to do something. Are there any questions at this stage? Please type in the dialogue box. I'm just going to have a quick drink of water. Flick through my notes, come back and then recover. So 5 models. Tell your stories. Your stories are your unique intellectual property. Your stories you know. You don't have to write your stories. You don't have to remember your stories. You don't even have to learn your stories. Visual cues. These are those objects that you bring up with you. PowerPoint is a visual cue. You can bring up 3 books and the title of each book may be the point you want to talk about. Use common questions. You're answering those questions all the time. You're an expert in neonatal health. You're a child health nurse. You're a disability advocate. What are the questions that a prospective employer asks you about employing someone with a disability? How am I going to train them? What if they don't do sufficient work? What if they're not productive enough? Those questions, you already know the answers. That can be the core structure for your speech. Mind mapping. It can be a map of Australia with the cities, Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. It can be the 4 points in a compass, north, east, west, south, news, and all the mnemonics. Communicate with care, prime yourself to speak, and that's how you present without notes. Workshops, you'll see them on my website, going all around the place, Brisbane, Melbourne, have some work in Bendigo and also Mildura. They're not on the website yet. Next webinar, fake it till you make it, the art of being confident. You could use this one for what if my mind goes blank. Fake it. Fake it that you're calm and confident. This is a lot about body language. This is a lot about dealing with nerves. And I've also got the ongoing public speaking mentoring program. It's a 12-month program. January is gone, but if you wanted to do some mentoring with me, you'd still have time to join that 12-month program. You know how to reach me. Any further questions, follow me on Facebook. Let me know. I finished a couple of minutes early. Sorry about the interruption. Are there any last questions for this webinar? How to present without notes. Yes, it does take courage. Yes, you may have a brain drain or your mind might go blank. And yes, you can have a backup set of notes. That's the secret to presenting without notes. Try it. Have the courage. All the great speakers in the world present without notes. Thank you and goodbye.